Welcome, the new video. In this recap, imagine growing up believing you're a llama until one stranger reveals you've been living a lie. Now, one little girl must risk everything to uncover the truth about who she really is. In a reality where talking animals exist, lives a little human girl named Emma. For some mysterious reason, she was separated from her parents when she was just a baby and adopted by Mr. and Mrs. White, a couple of llamas who live in a valley. Despite being much loved by her adoptive parents, Emma always felt excluded because she was different from the llamas. One day, while playing with her friends, she and a llama boy got into a competition to see who could hit the most bottles using a slingshot. The girl easily hits more bottles with her unerring aim, but the boy accuses her of cheating because of her 5-fingered hands. Emma replies that this isn't true, but he insists, saying she'll never be a real llama. This only makes Emma sadder. But she remembers that today is her birthday and invites her friends to a party at her house. However, believing that the llama boy might be right, Emma's friends refuse the invitation and leave. At that moment, a city rat appears, and seeing the human girl, he goes to talk to her and introduces himself as Dimitri. The rat felt sorry for Emma being rejected by her friends, but says he can help her, as he has seen people like her in the capital. He then offers to take her there, but Emma refuses, as her parents taught her not to speak to strangers. Even so, Dimitri says that if she wants to know more about his people, she can find him in the valley square that same night. Later, Emma returns home and finds her parents preparing her birthday party. Unfortunately, none of her friends came, but the llama couple comforts her, saying they have a special gift for their daughter. Upon opening the package, Emma finds a mask made of white fur for the girl to wear and look more like a llama. However, she says she will never be like her parents, and tells him about the rat's proposal to find other people like her in the capital. However, her father tells her not to trust the people in the city, as there are many bad animals who want to take advantage of others. Emma promises to do so, and after the party, she goes to her room, but she can't forget the rat's offer to learn more about her past. The girl then goes to the square and finds Dimitri, who is happy to see her, but in a surprise attack, he traps the girl in a sack and takes her to the city. Far away, in the capital, the young wolf Edward Wolf presents himself to the university's administration to show off his latest discovery. According to his research, he found evidence of a forgotten species that was also capable of speaking and thinking like animals. These beings, very similar to humans, are small in stature and, unlike most animals, have 5 fingers. Many believed they were just a legend, but Edward brings the bones of a predator, with a miniature skeleton inside serving as proof. Even so, the board doesn't take the discovery seriously and orders Edward to bring a live human specimen, or they won't approve his project. Frustrated, Edward and his assistant, the weasel Sancho, go to speak with Nikolai, a mandrill and university professor, to ask for his help. While walking through the city, Dimitri calls out to Sancho, saying he has acquired new merchandise in a village. The two then proceed to an alley, where the rat shows them Emma, a miniature human trapped in a cage. Seeing that he has found the specimen for Edward's research, Sancho agrees to buy her, but Dimitri sets a high price for the little girl. While they're discussing the price, Edward appears and is surprised to see a miniature human for the first time. However, the scientist becomes furious that she is in a cage and orders her released, paying the rat the sale price. As soon as he receives the money, Dimitri releases Emma, but the little girl seizes the opportunity and runs off through the city. Edward promises he won't hurt her and runs after her, but ends up bumping into Sancho, and the girl escapes through a sewer. Upon reaching the sewer, Emma tries to find her way out when she hears a voice coming from the tunnel and sees the shadow of a monster on the walls. However, as she gets closer, she discovers that it was actually a turtle with a robotic prosthesis on its right leg, who introduces himself as Newton. He's an inventor who lives hidden in the sewers, and he invites Emma to take a look at his creations. The girl is amazed by the turtle's ingenuity, but suddenly, Edward and Sancho appear in the tunnel looking for her. Once again, Edward tries to explain himself, but ends up stepping into a trap set by Newton, which activates his security system. Edward and Sancho see several pendulums swinging towards them, and when they try to dodge them, the demented beings begin to dance, as if they were rehearsing a waltz. Despite escaping the pendulums, the security system activates robotic boxing gloves, which begin punching both of them in the face. Edward recovers and retaliates with quick blows, while Sancho tries to rest a bit in a chair. However, the madman ends up triggering another trap, and underneath the seat there's a spring that throws him towards the ceiling. With both of them trapped, Emma and Newton flee to the forest through the tunnel exit, but they end up falling down a small hill. Neither of them was hurt, but because of the fall, Newton ended up losing his robotic prosthesis. Emma helps him look for it, but she comes across a bird that has Newton's arm in its beak. The girl asks for it back, but the bird decides to play a little with the mini-human and flies to the highest branch of the tree. Emma knows she can't face the bird alone, so she decides to disguise herself as a bird, using leaves and objects she finds in the forest. Next, she climbs the tree and tries to talk to the bird, but he quickly sees through the ruse and removes the girl's bird helmet. Not satisfied, he knocks Emma off the tree with his tail and laughs at the situation, when suddenly, a huge bear appears before him. The bird gets scared, but the bear seems friendly and says that's not how the forest animals treat visitors. He then tells the bird to return the robotic arm and apologizes to Emma and Newton for it, saying that he and the bird are part of a forest friends club. He even invites the pair to join the group, but in the middle of the conversation, Edward and Sancho appear in the forest. The bear quickly realizes that the two have some problem with Emma and Newton, and suddenly, he gets angry and orders everyone to make peace right there. At first, Emma refuses, but Edward extends his paw in a sign of peace, saying he didn't come to hurt her. The two greet each other, and the bear calms down, inviting everyone to his friendship club in the forest. However, Emma says she needs to continue her journey, so the bear gives her a special whistle as a gift. With it, whenever the girl is in danger, she only has to blow the whistle, and a friend from the forest will come to help her. Emma thanks him for the gift and invites Newton to accompany her on her journey in search of other creatures like herself. The turtle accepts, as she has always wanted to live a great adventure, and Edward and Sancho try to follow them, but the bear pulls them back and warns them not to hurt the little girl. Edward promises to do so, and the two follow Emma, with the scientist trying to find a way to convince her to return to the city. However, Sancho decides to try something more direct and advances towards the little girl, but upon seeing the ferret, she threatens to summon the bear using her whistle. The demented man quickly abandons the idea, and Edward tries to talk to her, saying that he didn't come to harm her. He just needs the girl's help with his research, but Emma replies that she doesn't have time for that, as she's searching for other mini-humans. Upon hearing this, Edward says that his research speaks precisely to this, and proposes a partnership to find the humans. Emma doesn't believe him and calls Newton to move forward, but she ends up slipping down a slope and begins to fall. To her surprise, Edward leaps in the same direction and tries to save her, but Emma grabs onto a tree branch while the madman falls face first to the ground. The scientist wasn't hurt, but Emma was surprised by his actions and realizes that Edward is a kind person. She then agrees to help him with the research, and Edward decides to take her to Professor Q, a dog and scholar of all living things. He says the professor is a great genius, but when they arrive at his house, the scholar doesn't recognize Edward because he's not wearing his glasses. In fact, the glasses were resting on his forehead, and Edward helps him see by putting the lenses back in place. Despite being a great scholar of nature, Professor Q was expelled from the university because of his theory that the Earth is round. The administration didn't believe him and sent him away, leaving the bumbling professor living in isolation in the forest, surrounded by his books. Even so, Professor Q is certain that the world is round, and as proof, he shows a globe he found on his travels. He also recounts that, for many years, he traveled the world and got to know many different places and species. Edward then shows him little Emma, a little girl he found in the city, who may prove his theory about the existence of mini-humans. Upon seeing Emma, Professor Q has a brief glimpse into the past and says that years ago, he found an island full of beings like her. Using the globe, he shows that the islands are somewhere in the west recaps where a village of these small creatures lives. Edward then asks him to show them the way. However, Professor Q suddenly forgets everything and becomes frightened upon seeing the visitors in his house. Unfortunately, the professor has developed a memory problem and doesn't remember much, including the location of the mini-human island. Because of this, he kicks the group out of his house, saying he's not expecting visitors. Even without the professor's help, Emma now knows where she needs to go, but they need to find a way to travel west and find the island. Newton has an idea and decides to build one of his prototypes, a flying balloon shaped like a fish. With the help of his new friends, the turtle gets to work on his new invention, and hours later, the balloon is finally ready. With everyone on board, Newton launches the balloon, and they all take off into the skies, searching for the island. While the turtle controls the balloon using its flipper-shaped wings, Edward goes to talk to Emma, who's watching the clouds in the sky with a sad expression on her face. The scientist asks what happened, and the girl says she's afraid of being rejected by the people of the island. However, Edward promises that this won't happen, as everyone will admire her courage in traveling to unknown lands in search of her people. The scientist's words cheer the girl up, and the group continues their journey when they see a flock of birds approaching. Newton believes everything will be all right. However, the flock proves aggressive and charges towards the balloon with its sharp claws. Sancho turns the rudder to steer the ship, but the birds manage to tear the balloon, which begins to fall rapidly. To buy some time, Newton orders the group to remove all the weights, but this will not help and they need to stitch up the hole made by the birds. Emma then volunteers to do it, and with her body attached to a rope, she jumps from the balloon, taking with her a ball of thread and a needle. As soon as she reaches the torn part, she begins to sew up the entire cut, but she needs to hurry, as the balloon continues to fall towards the sea. After stitching everything together, she pulls the thread with all her might and ties the knot, closing the hole. When it seemed too late, the torn part is completely sewn up, and the balloon flies again, skimming across the open sea. Thanks to Emma, the group is safe, and Edward and his friends congratulate her on her courage once again. The journey can finally continue, and after a whole day crossing the skies, Emma finally sees the island of the mini-humans, just as Professor Q described it. The girl is eager to meet her people, but as they see the balloon approaching, the tribe's warriors fire their arrows at the group. Luckily, the arrows don't puncture the balloon, but one of them was coated in sleeping potion and hits Edward's paw. Emma tries to help her friend, but the wolf can't resist and falls, along with the girl, towards the sea. Newton tries to go get them, but instead, Sancho has other plans and takes the balloon another way. Hours later, Edward wakes up strapped to a plank, next to Emma, being carried by a tribe of miniature humans. The scientist is happy to discover that the girl's people really exist, but the guards look at the wolf with suspicion and take him to the presence of his queen. Upon reaching the temple steps, Edward is introduced to the leader of the mini-humans and congratulates her on creating a civilization. However, the queen considers him a threat because, in the past, other animals have tried to attack her people. Edward tries to explain that he is a scientist and comes in peace, but the queen doesn't believe him and orders the guards to take him to prison. However, Emma gets in their way and tries to talk to the tribe, saying that he is their friend and will not hurt them. Even so, the queen considers her a traitor for defending an animal, and threatens to imprison her as well. Edward then easily frees himself from the ropes and tries to explain everything, but the queen activates a mechanism that opens a hole in the ground, dropping the wolf and the girl into a cave. With the two prisoners inside, the queen demands to know how they found her and who told them about the island. Emma insists they discovered everything on their own, but the leader doesn't believe it and decides to keep them in the cave for the rest of the night. However, soon after, the village begins to tremble, and the residents say that a monster has arrived on the island. The queen tries to calm everyone, but when she looks back, she sees a shadow approaching, and an unknown being attacks her by surprise. Emma and Edward hear screams coming from the cave and ask what's happening when Sancho appears through the opening in the ceiling. The scientist is happy to see him and asks for his help to get them out, but Sancho refuses, saying he came to the island to do a secret job. He then shows a bag containing the queen and two of her subjects, saying he will take them back to the capital. Edward asks why he is doing this, and Sancho reveals that he was hired by Nikolai, the university professor, to capture the mini-humans. Nikolai intends to take all the credit for Edward's research and has been using the young scientist from the beginning. However, he knew that Edward wouldn't be able to capture the mini-humans, so he paid Sancho to do the dirty work. With the truth revealed, Emma confronts Sancho, demanding to know Newton's whereabouts. However, the weasel explains that he threw him into the open sea so that the turtle wouldn't try to interfere with his plans. Sancho then leaves, and Emma blames herself for what happened to Newton, for him risking his life to accompany her on this trip. Fortunately, Emma and Edward hear a familiar voice, and a robotic arm extends into the cave, bringing them both out. Although Sancho threw Newton out of the balloon, the madman forgot that he is a turtle and can swim in the sea without problems. Still, Newton recounts that he encountered two hungry sharks, but managed to escape by transforming his arm into a jet propulsion system. Furthermore, the turtle saw Sancho escape with the balloon, and he is heading towards the capital to deliver the queen and her subjects to Nikolai. Emma then calls her friends to save the leader of the mini-humans, but to do so, they will have to build another balloon. The girl then goes to talk to the villagers, and upon meeting them, she apologizes for bringing all this trouble to the island. She promises that she will rescue the queen, but she needs the people's help to build a new balloon. Seeing that the girl is telling the truth, they agree to help and give Newton all the necessary materials. Finally, the balloon is ready, and before they leave, the queen's daughter asks Emma to bring her mother back, and gives her a seashell that she had given her as a gift. Emma promises to do so, and the group sets off back to the capital, where Sancho has just delivered the mini-humans to Nikolai. The professor is very pleased and organizes a convention to present his discovery, certain that the mini-humans will make him rich and famous. He then begins spreading announcements about his discovery throughout the region, including the Valley of the Llamas. At this point, Mr. and Mrs. White are worried about Emma, and fearing the worst, they decide to go in search of their daughter. Before they leave, they find an advertisement for Professor Nikolai's presentation about mini-humans found on an island. Believing Emma is there, the couple sets off for the capital, hoping to find the girl in the city. The next day, Nikolai asks Sancho to look after the specimens while he prepares his presentation. Meanwhile, Sancho takes care of the 3 mini-humans and takes advantage of being alone to drink some of Nikolai's beverage. However, the madman overdoses and falls unconscious to the ground, unaware that Emma has just secretly entered the university. She then takes the cage key from Sancho's pocket and goes to free the queen, but the queen still doesn't trust the girl. Emma apologizes once more and hands over the shell her daughter gave her, saying she came here to save everyone. At the same moment, Nikolai calls the university professors for his presentation, when a man appears with a sign calling him a fraud. The man reveals himself to be Edward, who confronts his mentor, but Nikolai tries to control the situation and calls him into his office for a talk. Inside, the professor says that the discovery of the mini-humans is the greatest of all time, and with Edward's help, they can become renowned scientists. However, the young man refuses, saying that he will not gain fame at the expense of a civilization. But Nikolai replies that this will happen, with or without him. Back in the room, Emma tries to escape with the queen and her subjects, when Sancho wakes up and tries to stop them. However, the leader of the mini-humans resists, and with Emma's help, the group attacks the madman and pushes the cage, which begins to fall down the stairs. Seeing this, Edward seizes the opportunity and puts Emma and the mini-humans in his backpack, fleeing the university with them. However, Nikolai doesn't intend to let them escape, and chases after the group through the streets of the capital. At the same time, Emma's adoptive parents arrive in the city and ask the residents about Emma, until they find a bird sitting in a stall. This is the same bird Emma found in the forest, and beside it is the bear chief. The enormous animal immediately recognizes the girl from the forest and promises to help the llama couple find her, unaware that Emma and Edward are fleeing at that very moment. Edward runs towards a wooden structure, but Nikolai jumps in front of him and demands the mini-humans back. Unfortunately for the madman, he steps on a loose piece of wood and falls straight to the ground. But Sancho also appears and tries to take Edward's backpack. The wolf runs towards a log propped up between 2 structures and tries to cross it, doing his best to keep his balance. Sancho tries to reach him with a jump, but Emma sees everything and helps her friend duck, causing the weasel to fall straight into the trash can. Despite this, Nikolai reappears and begins to swing the log, causing Edward to lose his balance. The wolf is about to fall, so Emma remembers her whistle and calls for Mr. Bear, who hears the girl's cries and rushes to help her, along with her parents. Despite his efforts, Edward ends up falling, and Emma slips out of the backpack, but the bird flies towards her and saves her before it's too late. After that, he takes the girl to her adoptive parents, who are happy to see Emma safe. Shortly after, Edward appears and Emma apologizes to her parents for running away from home. She then reveals that she has found other mini-humans and needs to take them back home before Nikolai captures them again. Mr. and Mrs. White promise to help them, and they all set off for the sea, where Nugan awaits them with his balloon. Emma's father returns her slingshot, and with everyone ready, the girl hands the backpack with the mini-humans to her family, while Edward tries to buy time. As he ventures out into the streets, the wolf encounters Nikolai and Sancho, who give chase in a small cart. Edward does the same, and in the midst of the pursuit, they collide with a pedestrian leaving the bakery. Using the madman's bread, the wolf and the mandrill engage in a duel through the city streets. The confrontation continues, but the carts go out of control and leap towards the sea. Luckily, Edward and Nikolai landed on the dock, but the professor tries to take the scientist's backpack, only to discover that it contained only cut potatoes. In fact, Mr. and Mrs. White have the real backpack, and are almost catching up to Newton's balloon. However, Nikolai has already discovered everything and is running towards them, when Emma appears, flying with the bird, and shoots stones at the villain with her slingshot. Despite their efforts, the mandrill is stronger, and he captures the girl with his hands, threatening to crush her if her parents don't hand over the backpack. However, Edward appears once more and attacks Nikolai, with the two engaging in a battle on the edge of the precipice. The mandrill resists the attacks, but Edward leaps towards it and the two rush to the edge of the precipice. Fortunately, the wolf manages to hold on, but Nikolai falls towards the sea, where hungry sharks await him. The fight is over, and without payment for his services, Sancho tries to apologize to Edward. The young wolf refuses, but Emma has an idea for him to redeem himself and forces him to join the friendship club, where he will learn some valuable lessons from Mr. Bear. Finally, the queen and her subjects can return to the island and thank everyone for their help. The queen also reveals Emma's true origins, saying that the girl was part of her tribe, but since she was little, she had always been curious and ended up boarding Professor Q's ship on his journey to the island. Finally, she says that Emma will always be welcome in the tribe, but the girl decides to stay with her adoptive parents in the Valley of the Llamas. Even so, she intends to take one last trip, and alongside Newton and Edward, the girl heads towards the island of the mini-humans, now certain of who she truly is. Subscribe for more recap videos.